inequity that has created a lack of opportunity for even someone like my mom, who was college educated and so to be able to access social mobility. So we immigrated to the United States, and I grew up undocumented my entire life. Unlike a lot of my peers, I knew from a very young age that I was undocumented. My parents never really tried to hide that from me. Sorry. And so I was always very keenly aware to the structural differences that I was facing, or that I would especially face upon reaching adulthood. Because I think one thing about the undocumented experience is that for the most part, especially growing up undocumented in California, specifically San Bernardino, California, you're pretty insulated from feeling a sense of difference when you're growing up, right? Thanks to different policies that exist in the United States. As a kid, when you're under 18, you can pretty much access everything, regardless of immigration status, whether that be school, California, that includes medical, mental health, and dental insurance, right? So for the most part, I felt like everybody else, right? And so it wasn't until I got to my college admission season that I really started to feel the difference of what my status would mean to me as I turned 18 and as I entered college. As I was explaining to Tony yesterday, actually, when we met, part of my decisions on where to go to college were limited based off of my undocumented status and the fact that I had safety concerns about what would happen to me if I boarded a plane or left the state. I mentioned to Tonya that I was actually admitted into two Ivy Leagues, Harvard and Yale, but I was almost in a sense forced to choose UCLA, not because I felt like I was settling, but because I couldn't access these opportunities and I couldn't have the freedom to decide the way that other students my age had, you know? And so I'm very pleased at where I'm at. I think the opportunities, things like this, the opportunity to speak today have come from the fact that I'm at UCLA, and I do believe that there's always a divine purpose and where we end up, right? But there is still that frustration over the fact that that choice was removed from me, right? That sense of autonomy was not something that I could enjoy because of something so fictitious as a made-up immigration status, right? So that's essentially like to frame it where I'm at. And so in 2012, President Obama, after being pushed by undocumented organizers, launched the DACA policy, right, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which would provide a 2-year stopgap on enforcement procedures over a qualifying undocumented individual, but would also allow them the opportunity to access a work permit to be able to financially support themselves, especially if they're students, right? I met all the criteria for DACA for all intents and purposes, even though there's flaws in the perfect image of an immigrant that DACA tries to support. I met that image, right? I was a high achieving student who had been here, who had never left the country. I met all the requirements of DACA, both the legal ones and the sort of poster boy de facto ones, right? And yet, because when I turned 15, so the age you needed to be to apply, I turned 15 in 2017, a month after President Trump decided to rescind the DACA program. So I was forced out of the program. So currently right now my application is frozen in USCIS. They still charge me the $500, right? But it's just frozen there in USCIS, and I finally got the chance to apply actually a year after getting into college, when a court order briefly reinstated the program to its original mandate, but 6 months later another court order dropped it down again and locked it down. So I haven't been able to access DACA, and from fall 2020 and moving forward, most of the undocumented students, if not all of them, have not been DACA eligible or have been blocked out of the program the same way that I have, right? But even at that, we always knew that DACA did not cover all of our undocumented community, right? So there was still a sense of inequity even with DACA, but now with DACA hanging by a thread, we risk complete inequity all over again, right? And the University of California staked a claim to be the pro-immigrant leading university in the entire country, right? In 2017, actually, when the president rescinded that program, they were the ones who filed a federal lawsuit to protect the program, right? And they went almost on an entire press tour talking about why they were the leading institution for immigrant youth. But that's not on par with the experience of immigrant students directly at the university like myself. You know, I've been here for 3 years now, and UCLA has made it almost impossible for me to retain myself at the university financially. I'm consistently in a state where I'm accessing different resources like the 580. Part of the reason why I work so closely with Jean is because Jean was the only person that was able to feed me sometimes. right? Jean was the only person that was able to give me the support that I needed, the financial resources to be able to pay my tuition, to be able to pay my housing when UCLA was knocking at my door ready to kick one of its own students out of housing, right? And so even though I came in with all these promises that UCLA would support me, that UC was the leading institution for immigrants, that here immigrant students could not feel like their status impacted them and could feel like, just like everyone else, they were UCLA students first and undocumented people second, right? Or, you know, I think more accurately, they were people first and then they were whatever their status made them out to be. And so I've been super involved in my community at UCLA, trying to access different resources, whether that be through student government. You know, there's a lot of different opportunities on campus that are stipended, and my passion really is advocacy work. So I love being involved in the student government space. And yet I've been blocked out specifically for my status, where other students are being paid. The university has asked me to do my job on a volunteer-only basis because they refuse to find ways to pay me. On the other hand, sometimes, if I'm lucky, they'll ask me to do it on a volunteer basis. Usually they just send me a random email after giving them months of my labor that I'm suddenly off or pushed off of whatever space I've been supporting in, and it's because they can't pay me. Where on the other hand, someone like Kent, who's the director of the Labor Center, has been working closely with me since I got to UCLA, and has consistently found ways, or tried to find ways, to get around this like stopgap at the university, right? But that includes bending over backwards and completely like creating me as an independent contractor in front of the IRS, right? Because that's the only way that I can be paid out. I have to be paid completely out of the university, because if a stipend does hit my financial aid account, what UCLA will do is that they'll subsidize the financial aid that they're giving me. So if I have a $5,000 award coming in from a different internship or a different stipended position, whereas with other students, they would just pay it out to them and the money would be theirs to utilize, what UCLA will do is that they'll take the same amount off of my financial aid so that they don't have to pay that amount. So, you know, there's no sense of support, and when you reach out for help, there's never an answer. But in front of the press, UCLA, especially, and the rest of the UCs, are still actively creating themselves as being the university for immigrants and the university for immigrant students, right? And it's not just me. I'm one of 44,000 undocumented students in the state of California alone that are facing this, you know, and that doesn't include the 800,000 DACA recipients that are about to start facing this when the court strikes down the program. So there's a very large inherent need to address a problem of inequity at the University of California. The image that the UC is putting itself in front of its admitted students, but also in front of the world, is not equaling what they're actually doing, and they're not looking out and protecting our students, you know. And so that's sort of where the campaign that we're going to talk about today comes in. You know, a lot of times in the immigrant youth movement and the immigrant rights movement, what happens is that when the federal government isn't responding, or when our other elected officials aren't responding to our issues, undocumented students themselves take it upon themselves to get creative and find different solutions to address their problems, at least the immediate needs of our community, right? Obviously the answer is the abolition of borders, but obviously beforehand, the passing of a comprehensive immigration package, right? That's for everyone, that brings in everybody. But until that happens, what can we do to address our immediate problems? And where that would also be the role of our elected officials and our university officials, they're not acting. And so undocumented students once again take it upon themselves to find the solutions. And luckily enough, we have found the solution. So I think that's where I will leave it for right now.
Thanks so much, Jeffrey, for leading us off, and you'll hear from another one of our students, Gareli, right after I finish, but it has been such a privilege for me working with Jeffrey and Gareli, and understanding that these are extraordinary students who, against all odds, are studying here at UCLA. Gareli as a graduate student in the School of Public Affairs, and Jeffrey as an undergraduate student. They bring so much to the UCLA community, and it is painful how our administration has done so little in return to ensure their financial support, to ensure their success as undergraduate and graduate students here at UCLA. I taught the first class in the country on the issue of undocumented students right here at UCLA, and our students wrote and published the first 3 books ever written by and about undocumented immigrant students. The first one was published all the way back in 2007 called Underground Undergrads. The second book was published a few years later called Undocumented and Unafraid, which has emerged as the slogan of the immigrant youth movement nationally. And the third is Dreams Deported, that captures the human suffering and the separation of families and the tremendous insecurity and anxiety and threat facing the 11 million undocumented immigrants across the country. We are now currently working on book number 4, and Jeffrey, who unfortunately has to leave now because he has another call, and Kareli are two of our student editors for the book that we are currently working on. So if any of you would like to pick up copies of these, they're only $10 each, what a bargain. And we would welcome to have you use these as resources within your church, within your communities, and to help publicize what is currently going on. And we are now in the process of working with our colleagues at the UCLA Law School to push the University of California to hire our undocumented students. We have conducted research that has determined that the 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act was never written to require that the states impose employer sanctions, and that for the past almost 40 years, the state of California has voluntarily denied employment opportunities to undocumented immigrants within the state of California, although they are not required to do so. This research has been validated by leading immigration attorneys throughout the country, including the dean of the UC Berkeley and UC Davis law schools, and some of the top immigration attorneys right here at UCLA. So we are asking the University of California to allow us to hire our students. I would hire Jeffrey and Kareli today if the University of California would allow me to do so, but currently they say, no, we will not allow you to hire them. And when I ask now why, it's because, well, even though we think we have the legal authority to do so, we are concerned that we may be confronted with litigation, and that we are concerned about protecting the interests of the university. And in my view, the best way to protect the interests of the university are to protect the interests of the students that we are here to serve. And so my good friend Jean Rose Smith, who has been such a huge ally and such a huge supporter of undocumented immigrant students for the past 14 years. And in my view, the work that Jean has done has put to shame the University of California administration, who with their vast resources have failed to provide basic financial support to address the housing and food insecurity that our undocumented immigrant students face. And although UCLA prided itself in raising $6 billion with a B during their centennial fundraising campaign, and are now launching yet another fundraising campaign, they refuse to allocate any of that money to provide food and support and assistance to our undocumented students. And to this day, they tell me that I cannot hire Kareli and Jeffrey, even though they tacitly agree that our legal analysis is right. So through Jean's efforts, we are now calling on leaders of the faith community to step up and to write and to call and to weigh in with the chancellor at UCLA and with the president of the University of California to ask them why they are refusing to exercise their legal right to allow us to hire undocumented students. And to date, even though this issue has been covered in the New York Times, it's been covered in the Los Angeles Times, it's been covered in the national media, to date, our chancellor at UCLA and our president at the University of California has refused to meet with us and has refused to meet with our students. So this has been going on for months and months and months. And they have told us through other means that, oh, they're so concerned. They care about our students. And in fact, if they allow us to hire our students, they're concerned about the backlash that our students may encounter. So this is what we're hearing secondhand on all the reasons why they're refusing to allow us to do the right thing, refusing us to allow us to hire our students. And now they're turning that around and saying, well, we're so concerned about the students themselves that if we call attention to them, that they may be placed in jeopardy. So this is known as university doublespeak. And now we really need people of faith, people of conscience to weigh in and to let the University of Cal President's Office to know, let the UCLA Chancellor know that the public at large, the community at large, are supporting our students and are calling on the University of California to do the right thing. I have been teaching at the University of California, Los Angeles, for 32 years. And through the course of my career, the finest students in my career have been undocumented immigrant students who, against tremendous barriers and obstacles, have gone on to get admitted, and in spite of all of the difficulties and all of the challenges before them, are succeeding and are thriving and have demonstrated extraordinary courage and resilience in the face of adversity. And I feel a deep sense of obligation that we as faculty at UCLA need to stand with our students, and I'm calling on our administration and I'm calling on our president to do the right thing. I teach a class every spring quarter with Reverend James Lawson Jr. He is 94 years old. You're welcome to come sit in our class. It's welcome to the public, open to the public. Wednesdays, beginning the first Wednesday in April from 1 to 4, right here at Dodd Hall, room 147. But Reverend Lawson, who has dedicated his life to the philosophy of nonviolence, to social and economic and racial justice, has made support for our undocumented students a centerpiece of his work. Yeah. And so at the conclusion of our class, we are having a teach-in on nonviolence the first Wednesday in June, and we will be focusing not only on the importance of advancing the philosophy of nonviolence at this critical time, we will also be focusing on mobilizing campus support for this campaign, which we're calling Opportunity for All, to demand that the University of California administration do the right thing. So far, we have support from the current chair of the UC Regents, the former chair of UC Regents. We have support from major leaders of the California State Legislature. The Latino caucus of the California State Legislature has endorsed and supported our call for Opportunity for All. And yet, to date, the UCLA Chancellor and the UCLA President refuses to meet with our students. So this is the time when we need to generate some public pressure to let them know that the public at large is aware of what's going on, wants our public university, funded and supported by public tax dollars, to do the right thing. And so if you could please join us, you can pick up a copy of our book, you could learn more about these issues, and if you could find ways to mobilize public support, either through calls, through letters, through emails, or to request a meeting with the Office of the President, or to request a meeting with the Chancellor and ask, why is it that you are not following the law and allowing us to hire our undocumented students? And how are you safeguarding the interests of a public university by denying opportunities for our students who desperately need these opportunities to graduate, to support themselves, and to also expand their own educational opportunities as our teaching assistants, as our researchers, as those who are ideally suited to work with me as the editor of our 4th book, which Gareli and Jeffrey are helping me as editors, and yet, in order to raise resources for them, we've had to set up an independent worker cooperative that is contracting with the UCLA Labor Center. And even that step, the university puts huge obstacles and barriers. So even though I've been trying to move these resources for months, every step of the way I'm getting blocked and challenged and questioned. Well, how are you moving resources to this worker cooperative? And it's our money. We raise the money, we raise the funds, and we want to use the services of this worker cooperative to help us edit this book. And we've transferred the funds are all ready. To date, we're still waiting for approval from the university. So this has been going on for months. But this is the nature of the UCLA administration, which on the one hand claims to support our undocumented students, but reality dictates otherwise.
Yep.
So I'll take a couple questions and then I'll turn it over to Gareli, or should we have Gareli first and then take the questions? Do you have a preference?
Is it okay if we just move on to Claire?
Sure. Great. So why don't we turn it over to Gareli, who is currently a graduate student in the School of Public Affairs here at UCLA, an extraordinary, gifted, and talented student.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had the privilege of working with her, and she is now an editor for book number 4 that we're putting out on art and activism of the immigrant youth movement. Please welcome Gareli.
Hey. Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you, Kent, for the amazing introduction. Thank you, Jean, for inviting us to this space. And thank you all for being amazing listeners and coming to learn about a very critical issue that I think as Christians we are really called to care about, and to care about our neighbor and really show up in the spaces that Jesus would show up himself. So my name is Gareli. My family and I immigrated to the United States when I was 2 years old to San Diego County. And I've basically lived here ever since. I am now 22 years old. So I've been undocumented for a little over 20 years now. And when you think about how that experience has been, or like how you are forced to live, it's pretty interesting when you go about your days having like a social security number or having access to job opportunities and things like that. But I think like growing up undocumented is a big fear. I think like even coming up from San Diego to LA, there's like a checkpoint where ICE can detain people, and if I am ever questioned about my status, I can't lie, and that automatically would deport me back to my country of origin, which is very scary because I think like the number one reason why a lot of families like immigrate is because they are fleeing the violence, the economic stability that they don't have in their country. And I think like it's been scary, you know. I was an undergraduate at UCLA. I've been at UCLA for 5 years now. I'm a first year graduate student in public policy, hence why I want to go into public policy, because the only ways people might ask like, oh, then why don't you just apply for citizenship? Why don't you just become, an American? And it's just like, oh, want me to list off the only 3 ways that technically you can become an American being an immigrant? One is either marrying an American citizen, and then being able to sponsor you, which sometimes becomes very difficult. Two, having a kid in the United States that was born in the United States, waiting till they turn 21 and basically have them petition you. Or third, be a victim of a crime, which is like, those are really the only pathways that you can be accepted in this society. It's like, oh, be a victim of a crime. So I think it's very limited, the ways and the resources that you have in order to exist in this country. And I think being a student at UCLA, you would think that, oh, like, I got accepted into UCLA, I probably treated like every other student, but in reality, like, you're not. You don't have access to scholarships, you can't work. The reason why I decided to continue my education was because, oh, well, if I graduate, I basically can't do anything with my degree besides work in the underground economy that I could have done without having a UCLA degree. And I think I am very passionate about advocacy and actually like using my privilege as a student to advance resources for the undocumented community, for the immigrant community. And I think that's why we came to talk to you all today, to really care about this issue. Jesus himself was a man that challenged cultural and political like stereotypes. He went to the woman in the well, herself being a Samaritan woman, where like before in those times, Jewish men couldn't really talk to women, especially someone from another ethnicity that really there was like no connection. But Jesus went the extra mile, and she was the first woman that he told him like, I am the Messiah, and knew like her history and had compassion over her and loved her. And I think that's what we are called as well, to like stand up and politically challenge systems that oppress the undocumented community, that marginalize us. And I think that's why here we're calling for you all to support the Opportunity for All campaign, that the University of California has the legal authority to hire undocumented students. And they have not challenged our legal theory, like Kent mentioned, but they have questioned, oh, is it politically sound for us to do this? What are the left and the right going to think? And it's just like, man, it's a moral question. My life is in the line, right? I could be hired today and have access and be able to pay for my tuition and be able to afford food and housing. But instead, we are scrambling for resources. We are finding a home at the 580 and other places that will receive us and be like, you are welcomed. Not because of your immigration status, but just because you are beautifully and you were created in God's image, and we love you and you are welcomed here. And I think that's the type of community that a lot of students crave, a lot of students need. And you all here have the power to accept those students and use whatever privilege you have, and like maybe having a connection at UCLA, or maybe making some phone calls early on Tuesday morning because Monday's a holiday, and being like, hey, we've heard directly from undocumented students, and we know that what their needs are, and we want to support them. Like, how can we do this? Like, you should listen to them. You should meet with them. It's ridiculous that we've been in this campaign since like, I think early September, and they have not wanted to like meet with us, but instead they have like they've tried to unorganize us by calling some of the attorneys that have supported us and being like, oh no, like the Biden administration might sue us and we're really scared, and do you guys want to be plaintiffs in a case that we want to take upon? But it's just like, no, we all know what happens in the courts, right? When they have right now the authority to just make change, and they can do it, they are going behind our backs and doing something that we don't agree with and we do not want happen. And I think like that's the pickle we're in right now, of organizing ourselves and building momentum. But like Kent said, I think now we need the help of the public, and we need you all to take a stand and be bold, and show up for students that many times, like, even though we're so marginalized and we have so much obstacles going against us, we still wake up every morning and fight for justice because that's what you have to do sometimes. So with that, I just want to challenge you with that, and want to give the mic to Jean to facilitate questions that you all may have. And so yeah, thank you for being here.